What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
In a post-capitalist world, the definition of the word affordable will be way less contested. For now, the feds and HUD say paying a third of your income is affordable. But if you were to go out to rent or buy a house right now, that is just not what's happening for the vast majority of people. Most people are paying way more than a third of their income. And that's why about half of Gen Z is living at home with family. And that number is just going to rise. As many have noted, the rent is too damn high. And what the term affordable means to landlords and politicians who largely set the housing laws and policy versus what quote unquote affordable means to the rest of us, those things are very, very far apart. Today, I'm going to talk to the zine creator we're going to call Gary, who came to this event that was put on by the mutual aid group, the Westside Tenants Association, members of whom have been on the podcast before. They put on a very nice event in August, and Rallo and I talked about the problem of YIMBYs. Gary's zine will be linked in the show notes. Thank you to everyone signed up at patreon.com/SadFrancisco. You are making paying my own rent slightly less arduous. If you're not already signed up and this podcast is in some way useful to you, please consider joining people like Jeff Wozniak at patreon.com/SadFrancisco. Thank you so much to Jeff and everyone else who is supporting the podcast. All right. So when did you start to become aware that housing in the US is fucked up and is not actually meant to house everyone?
That's a great question. I think there's different tiers to that, because I was homeless in 2010, 2009. And I certainly got a taste of it, especially in the Bay Area back then with the exorbitant rents. But, I tell people the prices back then, they don't even believe me. You could get a one room back then for like 700,
Sure. Pre-inflation, pre-recent inflation, everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was still after like the second tech boom, so it still wasn't like it was when I was a kid. But it was, I remember I paid a lot to get a place for $850 in the Mission back then. And I mean, that was a lot back then. It was $850 for like a room. And I had like a garden and stuff too. It's a different time. But yeah, I just remember I remember probably around 2011, 2012, like the mass exodus of all my friends, the Great Purge, when everyone was moving.
I know. I know. That's why, anytime I hear somebody coming back, I'm like, oh my God, this is like manna from heaven. Like something very unusual is happening. And kind of celebrate it because it's so rare.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I just remember like when I was in my early mid-20s, like all my friends are moving back in with their parents. All my friends are like working 2-3 jobs, and like no one
Totally.
can live in the city where they work. Like this dynamic, the Bay Area traffic starts getting really hairy the past 10 years too, because 20 years, because it's like that's what everyone's commuting, because no one can afford to live here. So
sure,
I started to definitely like wake up to it around that time. And then also I started learning about like what landlordism is. There was a group called Homes Not Jails that was connected with Food Not Bombs, and I remember just going to meetings and going to protests, learning about squatting, learning about how many vacant units, like vacant houses, are in San Francisco.
Yeah, we actually will have had Keith McHenry, who like was one of the co-founders of Food Not Bombs and helped found Homes Not Jails. I think the episode will have run just before this one.
Nice.
So very stoked about that. Anyway, sorry, I cut you
No,
off.
all good. So yeah, I was learning about vacancy rates. I was noticing all my friends couldn't live here that were working two jobs and stuff. And then I was finding out that like landlords, there's all these landlords that own multiple properties, sometimes many of 5, 10, 20 properties, and then learning about the corporate landlords. And there's different tiers of
Yeah,
landlords. And I heard a term, I heard a term not too long ago that a landlord used. I'm just a mom and pop landlord. You hear that one?
right.
I'm just a
Yeah. No, that some of the lingo, like I think maybe I've had the conversation on the podcast before, like mom and pop, it is this word to kind of, yeah, like it's a tricky word, as well as things like housing providers is like a thing that some landlords prefer to be called because of the negative connotations of landlord. They wish to be called something softer, something gentler, something kinder, like housing provider. And it's a concerted effort. Like they have these landlord conventions where people come together and they devise like ways to make themselves seem, like a necessary kind of institution in
right.
society.
How do we soften our image while stealing from the poor
Right.
at the same time?
Yeah. Because generally, like in general, people just do not like landlords.
Why
Like
ever?
unless you are a landlord.
Why
Yeah.
ever? Why
Yeah.
ever? Like, well,
So
it's so funny to me because like you go into history, right? And it's like the name of the origin of that term, right, comes from the agrarian like setup in medieval times, right? And you had literally lords of the land that owned these massive properties, and the serfs and the peasants lived on those properties and didn't own shit. And we're still living that. Like it's not actually changed, which is why the word hasn't changed.
yeah,
It's still a mass accumulation of wealth in the hands of the few, right? While the rest of us just trying to
totally.
get by. But yeah, just to answer your question, I'd say like my mid 20s, being homeless, all my friends leaving, the inflate the inflated housing pricing, the speculation, like noticing that happening in the neighborhood, and all these places going up for sale, all these places that are vacant, all these good buildings that are fine getting torn down with like luxury stuff being built up. And then more recently, just the past few years, I've been learning more and more about learning a little bit more about the vast real estate empires, the corporate landlords that are buying up as much property as possible. And that's some pretty scary stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So for people who don't know, could you kind of explain what Homes Not Jails, what their mission is?
Yeah, so their mission is to make a list of because when a housing or a unit is vacant, it has to be registered with the city. And so they make a list of vacant properties that that people can do whatever they need to do to get into to find shelter to sleep. So their mission is that housing is a human right. It's not up for negotiation. Like it's not like, oh, well, maybe if you fill out these forms or you do this or you wait in line at this shelter for this many hours and get a ticket and all these hoops, all this stuff. They're like, no, housing is a human right. Whatever you need to do to get housing and not be exposed to the elements, sleeping out in the cold and the dangers of that, um, do it. And so they help
Right.
people do that, and they help people, God forbid, sleep in vacant properties that are doing nothing.
Totally. And actually, yeah, we have like the local DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, candidates or who was a supervisor here locally, Dean Preston, had the city do an assessment of how many empty units of housing there were in San Francisco a few years back. This was just as like the quarantines were lifting in San Francisco. So or actually, no, sorry, this was a 2019 assessment rather. So before just before COVID. So the city was full. The city was like, it was very like, people were still here in like, you had the tech industry bringing people in mass before all the recent tech layoffs, which still haven't lowered prices. But so 2019, their assessment found like 60,000 empty homes in San Francisco. Now you compare that to, like, on an average night, how many people go without shelter because there's not enough shelter beds in San Francisco. And that number hovers around like 7,000, 8,000, and sometimes a little bit less. But obviously, we could house people many times over if we opened up those units that just aren't being used.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's these two words that really have always spoken to the nonsense that were peddled by City Hall and the media, and that is the scarcity myth. The myth of scarcity, right?
Yeah.
We are pummeled
Yeah.
with this over and over again. Not enough housing, not enough food, not enough money in the richest state in the country, right? California could be its own country and I think it's like number 7 or number 6 in the world as a country if it was its own country for
Mm-hmm.
its output. Yeah, for
Economy.
its
Yeah.
economy, and we're always just told, right, there's not enough. But the thing is, it's a form of gaslighting, right? And gaslighting being, using psychological manipulation to make people believe something isn't true that is obviously true, right? So when somebody says, there's not enough housing, like, you go by the Embarcadero and there's skyscrapers full of business buildings that are empty, right? Like, you know, um, and the lights are on, right? You ever go by some of these office places and the lights are on all night?
I know.
They're heated,
Yeah.
right? Their
Yeah.
fridges are running. Like you could house people. You could do your business in the day, house people at night, right? And they're not. Those aren't even counted in the 60,000, right? Those are empty
Oh,
business buildings. But yeah,
right.
we're just talking about
On top of that,
houses.
right. Yeah. And on top of that, you have like the security guards, you have the water continuing to stay on. I mean, the amount of resources that go into, like, quote unquote, protecting a completely empty building, it is
The motion
ridiculous.
cameras, the
And
motion
yeah,
lights. Yeah.
totally. I was just gonna bring that up because, yeah, Aaron McElroy. I'll link to some past episodes with Aaron in the show notes. But like, it's kind of wild, like the amount of surveillance that is happening with landlords that affects people, whether or not you are living under their thumb. It's a ridiculous amount of money being put into, yeah, surveillance equipment, surveillance tech. Landlord tech is its own like niche within the surveillance world. Like, cameras specifically meant to, check in on tenants is a thing in
I've got them
2025.
at my place. Yeah, my landlord
Oof.
installed them, and I mean this is across the board. Like I remember when it was a new thing that the boss, at the store, at the restaurant, doesn't actually go to the store or the restaurant anymore. They just set up some
Yeah.
cameras, and they just spy on their employees, um, and
Yeah.
violate their privacy. And it's this new kind of like, they talk about remote work, and they're always like, there was that big narrative during quarantine that, people that do remote work are lazy and like cheating the system and they're not getting real work done at home. Well, it's like, what about the landlords and the employers that never go into the office, that never
Yeah.
actually do repairs, right? That never do their responsibility, and they just set up cameras and it's all remote for them.
Sure. Yeah, like, if we're going to live under this social contract of capitalism and bosses like, being this conduit for people being able to make a living, like, yeah, we need to get rid of some of these things. And I mean, we need to get rid of the landlords, period. We need to get rid of the bosses,
Well,
period. But that said,
well,
sorry, go
because
ahead.
so the thing about this technology stuff, right? It's like I don't see it going away, right? And as much as I'd love to
Yeah,
see it going away, I don't think it's going to happen. And so what I'd like to see, what I'd like to suggest to people out there is let's use it to our advantage, right? Put cameras outside your landlord's place, right? Like whatever, you know what I mean? Like put like there's no reason that we have to keep taking it as tenants, right? And I used to tell my landlord this. I was like, how would you like it if I showed up at your house and banged on your door without any notice at all, right? Um, there's there's this sort of double standard that we get as tenants, you know, that we're not entitled to privacy, that we're not entitled to peace, right? That we're not entitled to um, just basic common human decency. And what I love about seeing groups like Tank and stuff like that taking on some of these battles for tenants is it's like you know, treat your neighbor how you'd like to be treated. And if these landlords are not treating us with respect, right, and they're not you know, they're violating our privacy, they're putting in motion detection cameras in our, you know, in our living space, they're changing laws, right, all the time to take away our rights, then we don't need to be polite all the time. We don't need to wait for them to come to our
sure.
unit, right? We can go down to the
Yeah,
rent board and do public records requests, find out where does your landlord live? What properties do they own? That's all public information. And you can go down to the rent board today and go on their computer and find tons of useful info on your landlord. How many people have they evicted? How many Ellis
yeah.
active evictions have they done? Let's do a Yelp for landlords. You know what I mean? Let's get their names out there.
Make them as uncomfortable as they are making the rest of us by keeping the prices so high, by making life more and more unaffordable. And I wanted to mention, yeah, you noted that Tank is one of the groups that's doing some work locally around this issue. And Tank is not just in San Francisco, but it stands for Tenant and Neighborhood Councils. It is basically a tenants union. Um, so you can, if this is like of interest to you and you are interested in, you know, working on getting to know your neighbors, turning your neighbors out to resist the sort of, you know, tomfoolery that landlords are kind of putting out there into the ether every day, then Tank is one of the options for Homes Not Jail is another option for groups that are doing this work specifically.
And the tenants
Um,
union and tenants together are also good options to know about. Maybe they're not doing quite this kind of stuff, but
yeah, a lot
they
of the work
have
that Gay Shame
resources
does
and
is
support
also,
as
you know,
well.
anti-gentrification
Oh no.
work. Oh, I think I lost you right there. All right. Okay, we're back.
Hmm.
So we were just talking about some of the different groups that are working to sort of combat the power imbalance that exists currently between tenants and landlords. So basically, you know, landlords are one of the major kind of groups that it benefits to keep housing unaffordable. Benefits because, you know, when you have a rare commodity under capitalism, then you can charge more for that commodity. And you also mentioned, you know, corporate landlords specifically that were kind of less of a problem before maybe like 10 years ago when these companies like Blackstone started buying up a lot of the affordable housing stock. And, you know, like with the power of many, many investors behind them, are able to outbid, you know, people on houses, outbid um, what people can pay, and then can leave it empty if they want to
Mm-hmm.
because they're so they have so much money
When
and
there's
we just can't compete.
Yeah, I mean, there's an advantage to leaving it empty too. Like it's part of speculation. and predatory investment. So, and Zephyr Real Estate is another one of the big ones. I mean, there's a few that we have here, but you're absolutely right. Um, what these investors do is they realize that we have a the boom bust of the capitalist economy, right? We're in a boom right now in the Bay Area because of AI tech, and that's not going anywhere. Like AI is going to be drawing people here like moss to the flame, and they know that. And so they realize if they can buy housing right now at market rate or whatever it is and then sit on it, it's going to appreciate. You let it appreciate and then you flip it. Now, what housing is easier to flip if you're speculating? Housing that's not occupied. Because then the next buyer doesn't have to evict anyone, doesn't have to or keep renting to whoever's there. There's no cleanup to do, right? You can just keep it in nice shape and then flip it whenever you're ready. And this is what speculators do: is they find properties. Sometimes they might fix them up, but they fix them up to leave them empty. And the other thing
Right.
that these corporate landlords, if they do rent, what they really like is the tech people that are just going to be staying momentarily, right? They're not
Uh-huh.
they're not interested in renting to families. They're not interested in renting to people that are invested in the community that want to live in San Francisco for years or decades, right? And so you get a lot because of this. You get a lot of transitory population here because that's what's interesting to landlords as a commodity.
Yeah, and so I mean, they love when somebody is new to town, is spending 12 hours a day at the Google HQ in Palo Alto and then just comes up to the city to like sleep and that's it.
Yeah.
That's totally fine with them. Don't bring any friends over. Don't have any kids like running through the place to like get it dirty. And the other thing that AI is not only a problem for the Bay Area because we still have a lot of tech companies that are hiring people and bringing them here and making it harder to afford for people who already exist here. Um, those AI companies, in some cases, are making software that landlords are using, like RealPage, which is I'm not sure the status of the court case, but it was being sued by the FCC because it allowed landlords to sort of collude on pricing to make to like sort of edge the prices higher and higher using this software where it was pulling the pricing from landlords who were reporting what they were charging their tenants all across the US. And you have AI companies creating algorithmic pricing. So, like, just like with you look at a plane ticket in 2025 and then you close the browser window and then you come back to try to buy that plane ticket again and suddenly it's like more expensive. That kind of tech is being used for rental homes for people who are just like looking for a place to stay as well. um yeah, I mean, it's not looking good
Well,
when
it's
it comes to landlord tech.
yeah. I mean, it's that whole broken ethos of charge what the market will bear, right? That's what landlords believe in is most, and it's not all across the board. I'm not going to sit here and cry a river for landlords, but I think it is important that there is landlords as a class are not all the same, although they're largely the same and they have a common interest. I consider them, I mean, they're a lobbying group. We talk about lobbying in Congress and corruption with lobbying. Like landlords are a huge part of that. And they're very interested in protecting their class interests. They're very interested in combining together, like you said, pooling resources, developing tech that will increase their wealth. And what people I find often don't understand, because landlords don't show up at your house and say, "Hey, I'm checking on property number 15 today," right? But what they're really doing is they don't advertise how many properties they own. This is why I encourage people to do public records requests to go to the rent board, find out how many properties your landlord owns and how many evictions they've done. I was shocked when I found out that my landlord owns more than a handful of properties, has done multiple Ellis Act evictions. Um, and
Yeah, and some of this information is available through the anti-eviction mapping project, which Aaron had a hand in creating. Aaron McElroy that I mentioned earlier, and they don't have all of the landlords listed there yet, but they do have some of the local corporate landlords here in the Bay Area. I think LA and Portland is another city that they've started to cover. But yeah, I mean, absolutely right. Like, I mean, the real estate industry is in most cities the top funder of local political races. So,
mhm,
I mean, that's a problem. So you have, these huge lobby groups like California Apartments Association is one of the big ones that is pressuring politicians to make sure that all of the laws, all of the municipal policies are in their favor.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I mean, you see in San Francisco, with the mass gentrification that's been happening here. Obviously, it goes back decades, but it's very much intensified in the last 10 years. And you have a changing demographic of voters. And when you don't have voters that are super pro tenant, I mean, 10 years ago, I mean, this was a very pro tenant town. It still is in some ways, but that's changing as these high rises are being built and families are being forced out and generations of San Franciscans are being forced out. And so what you get is you get these voter blocks of landlords and people that just moved here that are just drinking the Kool-Aid from the landlords, the AstroTurf, uh, organizations, which I'm sure you and our listeners will know about at least some of that. All these like quote unquote together SF and the YIMBY stuff, all this fake stuff that's coming in. If you haven't lived in San Francisco for, 5 or 10 years, on face value, some of it's very easy to fall for. And
Yep. Yeah, in a lot of cases, I think they prey on people who are new to activism too,
yes.
in a way. And they're like, I know I can see that you are aware that this is a problem, that gentrification is a problem, and maybe you are even a gentrifier who wants to, um, you know, do something about the fact that you're maybe edging people out of being able to afford anything here. Come join our group. We're about housing affordability, and they use this kind of lingo that is specific to like a sort of maybe progressive or at least like liberal voter that is appealing and kind of is like a little bit like heartwarming,
Mm-hmm.
makes it feel like, oh, maybe I'm doing something good, when in fact, like, they are funded by, and like the Yimbys are funded by and are looking after the interests of the people who already own the property.
Yes. Yes. Vast corporate wealth.
Um, yeah. So, do we need to banish specifically the word affordable from our vocabularies? Was a question that I had for you, given that you created this great zine that will also link in the show notes. And it basically is just a rundown of, you know, what what does affordable even mean in 2025?
It's a great question. I mean, I think it's hard to answer because it speaks to such a broad issue. Like all of our language is being repurposed right now. All of it, right? I mean, make America great again, right? Make America great again. Okay, well, that of course that's it's a very interesting one, right? Because that's another example of like words being repurposed. So okay, you're saying America's not great, but it was great once. But like, what version of great are we talking about? Are we talking about like FDR and the Green New Deal great? Are we talking about like the passage of the Social Security Act great? Are we talking about the abolition of slavery great? Are we talking about the civil rights movement and Dr. Martin Luther King great? Are we talking about women's suffrage great? No, right? When they say make America great again, they're talking about their version of what greatness is, right? The MAGA crowd. And
Sure.
that's what the YIMBYs do, right? We want affordable housing, right? But it's the Make America Great Again version of affordable, right? It's they're redefining that word, and we see this across the board in our political social landscape, where this is why, you know, people have emphasized such a there's so much emphasis on critical thinking skills and looking beneath the surface and things. And, you know, what are your sources that you trust? Obviously, San Francisco is one of them. Maybe, you know,
Of
of
course.
course, right? But you know, you gotta. There's a lot to parse through, right? Like, what information here can I trust? What's going to be accurate? And I think, you know, we can call affordable housing like gobbledygoo housing. Like it's just a word, right? What's behind the word is what's important, right? Like some of these astroturf, you know, and for any of our listeners that don't know, they're these, you know, dark money funded right wing groups that have progressive slogans that have been trying to rig very successfully, have been rigging local elections with a bunch of misinformation and gaslighting and bullshit. And so, like, you know, if you look at something like that, Together SF, do we ban the word Together SF? Well, no. Like we want to, like, those are just words, right? They sound nice. What's behind them? Follow the money trail,
Hmm.
right? So when somebody's talking about affordable housing, is it a glossy, you know, postcard that's in full color that's coming into your mail box and you don't know where it's from? Like, note to voters, if you get stuff in the mail that looks like it's really high print quality and it's glossy and it's asking you to vote for something, do the opposite. Because just do the opposite, okay? Because like the things that actually matter, the things that are actually worth fighting for, like tenants' rights, housing, like LGBTQ rights, like better better funding for schools, like all these kind of things, they don't have any freaking money. You know what I mean? Like all those things that,
Mm.
you know, they've got the smallest budgets in every election. You can go back, and all the things that are actually worthwhile, the vacant homes tax, you know, very small outreach, right? The Prop C from 2018 for building uh, more shelters for the homeless, right? You know, like had like a tenth of the budget of the no on Prop C, right?
Oh, so Prop C, I think lately that money has been used for shelters, but I think it was initially meant for permanent long-term housing. So the mayor has sort of flipped that a bit and decided, like, well, maybe I'll just instead of taking from the cop budget, because I always want to be making sure that we're increasing the cop budget, giving them as much overtime as they need, as they want, and oops, like our budget, we gotta start being a little bit more austere. We got to bring in the austerity when it comes to the budget, and so we're just going to take from this fund. Prop C was a ballot measure that people voted to put a tiny tax on huge corporations making, I think, over $15 million a year
Five
in San
zero, yeah,
Francisco.
$50 million.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
the SF
So you know,
Chronicle is
giant
one of those.
corporations.
Yeah, the SF Chronicle was one of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
Huh.
they're owned by the Hearst.
Surprising.
Yeah, they're owned by the Hearst Corporation, and so
Right, right, right,
they
right.
were
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
adamantly opposed to Prop C in 2018, as was the previous mayor.
yeah.
And so you just follow
So
the
it's a
money.
tiny tax.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, tiny tax. And then unfortunately, our mayor Daniel Lurie decided, like, instead of building like permanent housing for people who are unhoused, we're just gonna like maybe up the shelter budget a little bit.
Well, Mayor Breed actually worked with a bunch of scumbags to tie those funds up in court for like years. And
Yeah, 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 yeah.
there's been all these fights with that stuff. But yeah, I mean, just to go back to your question about you know, affordable and this, that, and the other, it's like I think the road that we have ahead of us is how do we build independent media like indiebay.org. If you're listening to this, please bookmark INDYBAY.org. That was part of the independent media movement in the late 90s, early 2000s, because activists were recognizing even back then that the landscape of where we get our information from is getting tainted, right? Is getting full of
Yeah.
a lot of garbage. And
Yeah.
These are just words, right? The words don't mean anything. It's what are the numbers behind the words? Who are the people behind the words? Who are the organizations behind the words? What
Yeah. I would argue that it has been tainted for sure. I mean, talking about things like the Chronicle being owned by the Hearst family, which is one of the biggest commercial real estate owners. Like, they own a lot of downtown. And so, of course, they have an interest in using their publication, the SF Chronicle, to forward their own interests. And of course, they're going to be against things like Prop C. And so, yeah, absolutely. You need like options like Indie Bay, like alternative media. Otherwise, all you're getting is the newspaper that is owned by the real estate corporation that's just going to parrot the wants and desires of the owners of that real estate corporation.
Wait, so I have a question. Who owns San Francisco podcast?
San Francisco is an independent media organization that is, I guess, owned by me.
What? But where's the corporate ownership, man? Where's
I know.
Where's HR?
Right. We're not, not even an LLC situation. But yeah, absolutely. Like, even online, it is getting, it's getting a lot muddier. Like, where do you find like good information? Google is like broken.
Google
at
is
this
so
point.
broken.
There's so much AI slop that is like basically like the first 10 results on Google now. So it's very.
I have some background.
More difficult.
Yeah, I have some background specifically for YIMBY stuff with Google AI that I found interesting. But yes.
Ooh. Yeah, pray tell.
Pray tell. Well, so when I was doing some research for the vacant housing rate in San Francisco, and this is so if you know how AI works, large language models, like they comb through like commonly used websites, right? And they parse out relevant information. It's not magic, okay? It feels like magic. A lot of people ascribe magical qualities to it, but it's not even artificial intelligence. It's a large language model. And when I type in at Google, hey, and I would put in stuff like using city government websites. Can you tell me what is the current vacant housing rate in San Francisco? Current number of vacant units. Nothing came up, right? Using the city controller's office, Google, using their website and their data, please tell me what the current, I mean, this is really basic public information stuff, right? And all Google was spitting out was YIMBY websites, like completely fringe, unofficial bullshit. And I was specifically asking for government statistics, right? And this is the landscape that we live in now, where these search engines kind of function as a second brain for us, and we go to them expecting sort of egalitarian, unbiased whatever. But these algorithms, and especially AI, it's a massive bias. And it's good to know who your friends are and who are not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you can just go directly to a source, a trusted source, instead of using some of these search tools. Unfortunately, they're just not as useful as they were like even 5 years ago, for finding like good information that's not like trying to sell you on how housing providers are doing great work out there. But I wanted to, like, for people like that, this is kind of like housing policy and stuff. It's generally like a thing that I think makes people tune out a bit. So I appreciate like alternative ways of just getting this information out, trying to like spell it out for people in a way that isn't like super wonky. Like, I think the YIMBYs like depend on the fact that people don't necessarily understand local housing policy, and they're
and
like,
why
just
would
leave
they?
this to us.
Yeah, I mean, why would they though?
Yeah,
right? Like who moves here and is like,
Right.
oh man, yes, I'm an expert in local housing policy. Or even if you've lived here for 20 years and not know this stuff, right?
For sure. So I think you laid it out pretty, like, in a way that is, it will translate for a lot more people about, issues like, okay, so what is AMI?
Yeah, let's talk about. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about some of these things?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it.
Because this is
Let's
the
do it.
stuff.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that I think is the most important, right? We get told there's going to be a large condo complex built, and it's going to be 40% AMI. Like, what does that mean, right? And first off, they don't even tell you it's going to be anything AMI. They just say affordable housing, quote unquote, affordable housing. What is behind that term? What does that actually mean? Well, that means that it's going to be below the area median income, that it's something that you can rent. What's the area median income? Well, that's the AMI. This is a government stat, um, put together by the HUD. And what does HUD stand for? HUD is the housing. There's the Mayor's Office on Housing and Community Development. That's MOHCD.
Yeah, it's urban
Development,
development.
yeah,
Yeah.
housing and urban development. Anyway, so these people in the government, right? They decide, well, okay, one person with no family, you know, living in San Francisco, um, comfortably, I guess, is $109,100 a year. So if you make 109K in a year, you're supposedly able to afford market rate rental units.
So I have personally never made $109,000 in a single year.
Neither have I. Now, I don't want to. If anyone wants to donate, to San Francisco or me,
Sure,
right? Let's make
sure.
this happen. But so far, it's yet to happen. And right,
Yeah.
and it's sort of insane when you think about it, that people at City Hall think that this is a median income for a single individual in San Francisco. This shows you what kind of cloud that they're living on, right?
Right.
And so if you make anything below $109,100 a year as a single individual, it's a lot more if you have a family. But if you're a single individual and you make below that, you are considered low income, right? So if you only make
Yep.
$100,000 a year, you qualify for low income housing.
Right.
And when you start looking in this stuff and you see, well, what do you mean by affordable housing? Can you show me the documents, right? What is the criteria? How much rent is going to be charged? And by the way, that will change based on they'll advertise it one thing and they'll change it when it's move-in day, right? It's always moving around. But if you can finally pin it down, a lot of times they'll say it's a percentage of AMI. So they'll say, okay, it's 60% AMI. What's 60% AMI? That sounds great, right? You're in the 60% and of the poverty threshold in San Francisco. Oh, that sounds so great. We're going to be helping some people here. What's 60% of AMI? That is a person that makes $65,450 a year.
So we're talking about housing, like the levels at which the local government sets affordability rates.
Yes.
Here. And so I mean, in some cases, like they will promote or advertise like new housing coming onto the market. And if you make certain levels of income, you are allowed to apply for it because you are, lower income. And then in some cases, like, I don't know about today, but I remember I knew somebody who, like, we were talking about this before we started. This person I knew had a roommate who was an intern at Google and was making under that level at which they would be considered like a normal income person. So they were able to apply for this low income housing and then continue to live in it for, I think, like 10 years because there wasn't a means testing, I guess, during that period. Once they had already, like, long ago transitioned from Google intern to Google employee. In any case, there's obviously it's not a perfect system, but certainly, and we just need to decommodify housing, but it's still important, we live under capitalism. I think it's useful to know some of these terms.
If I can explain a little.
We know.
If it's okay, because So one of the things that's often understood is if you're making $20,000 a year, oftentimes you can't even apply for that quote unquote affordable housing. They have requirements of your income rate within that percentage of AMI. So they might say, okay, if you make at least $40,000 to $50,000 a year, then you can apply for this quote unquote low income housing that's 60% of AMI. And this is what's really frustrating, because for me, I might be able to afford a unit that's 1,000 or more of a month rent, right? But if I can't prove that my income is $60,000 a year, I can't even apply. I can't even be considered,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
the other part of this that's so nefarious, right? It'd be one thing if they were honest, right? If they said, look, this is going to help some of our teachers, this is going to help some of our bus drivers get housing. Sure, that might be the case, right? But what they always do is they say this is going to help the homeless. This is going to help the disabled. This is going to help seniors. And that's crap. That's utter crap, because if you're disabled, if you're a senior, if you're in and out of the shelter system, your income is usually fixed. And it's usually fixed somewhere around, actually, it's lower than 15% of AMI, somewhere around 8 to 10% AMI probably, is what you're actually making. I have never, not once, seen quote unquote affordable housing marketed below 15% or even below 20%, even anywhere near that. Right. And so
Right, right, right. So this is really not housing for unhoused people or people in the shelters to move into to have a more stable, permanent, long
not
term
at all. Yeah.
to live. Yeah,
Not at all.
yeah.
And you got to ask, and this is what I ask people. You got to ask, right? Why is it that multimillionaire, like, condo developers, right? Why would, like, since when does City Hall, since when do these, like, multimillionaires, sometimes billionaires, since when do they really care about the homeless? Since when did they start caring about the disabled and the seniors, right? They don't, right? They're trying to find they're using a marketing strategy to get their new projects built, right? They don't build these
Hmm.
things without expecting a return on their investment. That's the other thing. There
Right.
is a return on investment. You got to think like a capitalist, right? If you want to understand what's really going on. A capitalist is not going to come in and build a $100 million skyscraper, or a 10-story building or whatever in the heart of the mission and not expect a return on their investment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, they also, like, capitalists even include things like community pushback when they are
Yes.
uh, conceiving these plans to develop a new high-rise condo. They know if they're going to be gentrifying an area, especially in San Francisco, where we do have more of a culture of people who, we have more anti-gentrification activists here than maybe a lot of other places in the US. It's like we live in a culture where in, like, the 1970s and like all of the tenants' rights movements that happened decades ago that still has some power here locally. They
Yes.
know, oh, I want to make tons and tons of money, like, by building a new market rate condo in San Francisco. I will get a little pushback. So they even pencil that into their plans, because they need to promote it in a way that, like you say, like, kind of deceives people into thinking that this is going to be great for the community.
Yes.
Otherwise, they know they're going to get more pushback. It's going to take a longer amount of time to get built. They're going to have planning department, holding it up a bit more, and they're going to have all these hearings with the community. So yeah, they figure that in too.
And they've learned from their mistakes, right? From the 2016, there was it 2013, there was the Monster in the Mission project that the Plaza 16
Right.
coalition formed around. And we as a community, we fought that back, right? That cost them a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yep.
think they learned from that. They changed their strategy. They learned that they can't
Yep.
just advertise how beautiful and nice and new these buildings are going to be. You're not going to have graffiti anymore, right? That wasn't that wasn't doing it for people, because people know that there's poverty. They know that there's homelessness. They want those things addressed more than they want a Westfield shopping mall in their backyard. And this is where the creation of YIMBY, really starts to take off. I mean, a little bit predates that a little bit, but this is where a lot of those tactics start being employed more with places like Manny's, and these community cleanups that they do, right? Where they put flyers all over the community, come clean the streets with your neighbors, right? And it's a whole strategy. It's a whole strategy to appeal
Right.
to people that actually do care about ending poverty and homelessness in San Francisco. And so my heart goes out to a lot of people that actually might even consider themselves pro YIMBY. I have a friend who's pro YIMBY, and it's heartbreaking because they're drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And the Kool-Aid that's being passed around is in the language, right? Is you got to follow the money trail. You got to see what does this really mean? And you talk to people there's people that move here that work in tech, that want to be part of the community, that want to do good things, and they don't know the history. They don't know what's really going on with this stuff. And they see, oh, community group, like clean up the streets, I know people that are like, they let people that are homeless, kind of like sleep on their doorstep and stuff, right? And they volunteer and they try to do stuff in the community, but they're really tricked with this stuff. They're really duped by it. And
Totally. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I was
Yeah. I mean, again, like I got some of these slogans that like I remember like T-shirts that Yimbys used to wear called it said legalize housing.
wow. Just one last point on the whole AMI and all this, like building new things, right? There is not a housing crisis. There's not a housing availability crisis in San Francisco. As you said in the beginning of this, we have something like 60,000 vacant units. Now, when I did research and I finally made it past the Google AI bullshit, I ended up getting official statistics from the SF Controller's Office for 2020. I was not able to find ones for later than that, although I'm sure they exist. But the trend started from 2005 to 20,000 vacant units. 2020 it was 40,000, and today it's even higher. And so you have vacant units. You have housing. You have housing that could be affordable.
Yeah.
Right. What did Dean Preston's office and some of the tenant rights advocacy groups do to address this? They created the empty homes tax, Prop M, which was a minor tax on landlords who left units empty that could be housing, right? Just a minor incentive, right? You could rent this out to somebody, you won't get this tax, and you'll make money, right? Even trying to work within capitalism, right? Just rent out your vacant place. And that was passed. It happened for a while, but the YIMBY crowd and their politicians and their political hand got it thrown out last fall in 2024.
Right. It went straight into like litigation, unfortunately. Like even this tiny tax, this is who we're dealing with. People that do not want to budge an inch. Like they don't want to give up any ground. They don't want to make life a little bit less easy for the people who are basically forced to deal with them.
Yeah, and
because they own the property.
And this is I stress this because it's a really bad look for YIMBY when we start talking about the vacant housing rates. And this is the one thing I cannot get any YIMBY person to accept the fact, right? The fact that there is tens of thousands of vacant buildings. This is a fact, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're thinking like, hey, I might be a YIMBY, or like my friends are YIMBYs or whatever, like the real test is, do you support squatting, right? Do you support somebody getting shelter from a vacant building, right? And do you support facts, like there are vacant buildings, right, by the tens of thousands?
Totally.
And this is like the litmus test for anybody in the YIMBY movement, right? You bring this up and they lose their shit and they'll gaslight you to the end of the earth. because if they can't cede that fact, right? They can't say, yes, there are in fact 40, 50, 60,000. Let them make up their own number, right? In the tens of thousands. They can't even admit that there's 10,000 vacant units, right? Like they can't cede that fact, because if they do, it defeats their entire bullshit argument that we've got to keep building and building and building.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've kind of talked about this a bit, but you know, I'll pose it in a different way. What do you think generally prevents most politicians from building the free or cheap housing we need that would make it so people would never have to squat?
The thing is, like when you look at things like the post office, when you look at things like Social Security, when you look at things like food stamps and the food security that we have in this country, um, which is not perfect, but at least we have a food stamp program, right? These are not profitable ventures. You do not get a return investment on this, right? Social Security, I mean, the return investment, I mean, I guess unless you want to think of it in like social terms, right? The return investment you get off of feeding people is you have a better functioning society. People are able to eat, right? They're much less likely to hurt each other and much more likely to, do better in life and hopefully contribute back to society, right? There are social investments in that sense, but there's not financial returns, right? And the problem is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is that our housing market, and we call it a housing market, right? It's a housing right, right? It's a human right. It shouldn't be treated as a market, right? It's been totally and utterly commodified as an investment strategy. And if you talk to rich people, if you listen to their podcasts, you listen to their lobbyists, housing to them is a really good way to invest their money. They view it as
Mm-hmm.
a way to get financial returns. And it's actually
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to blame them, because it gives better financial returns than a lot of stocks do, right? Um, it's a
Yeah,
very
because people need
because
this.
people
It's a
need it. It's a
necessity. Like
necessity.
there's
Yeah.
no like there's not ever going to be a point in time if we're under capitalism where it's not going to be profitable. Like just like certain you could talk about like food as well, but like shelter in particular, and that's why it's the most expensive thing in most of our lives. They're able to charge more for it because it's something everybody needs.
Well said. Yeah, and so I think we need to revisit, and I say we, I think a lot of us already know this, but especially the politicians and and the policymakers, is that we need to revisit, if we want to, going back to that repurposing "Make America Great Again" slogan, which is so disgustingly, uh, used by all the really really hateful people. But there was a time when the vision of America was to make affordable housing that was real, to pass Social
Mm.
Security Act so that veterans could have health services, right? When we talk about mental health treatment, right? Um, and things like PTSD, that was originally called shell shock, because of all the soldiers coming back from World War I that were utterly traumatized by that war. And as a society, we figured out, like, you know, these people need help, right? These people need some kind of security and support after being traumatized, right? We realized during the Great Depression, as a society and through the social movements and the activism that was happening back then, that people just dying on the streets because they're disabled probably isn't the way to go. Like we could probably do better as a country. And we need to get back to that ethos of the humanity, right? And what are we doing to support our community and our culture and our society beyond just dollars and cents?
What? Yeah, no. I mean, what is the point of a government if it's not there to take care of the people that live under that government? For me, there is no point
Yeah.
if that is not like the first thing on the list, which makes me an anarchist. But even as we've said, like under the rules of this, sort of like uh, capitalism that we live under today, it's certainly not anywhere at the top of the list, like take care of the people that live here, unfortunately. But I think that conversations like this one are useful as we try to move towards that world, just like information sharing about the things that are kind of being used either for or against us. Things like, terms like AMI, which, can be kind of off-putting when you see it. You're applying for affordable housing. So just want to say thank you for coming on, and thank you for the zine. The zine, we'll post a link to it where people can download it and distro it to your neighbors.
That would be amazing. Can I share one closing thought on the zine?
Yeah.
I just want people out there to know, because I found this out for myself, there's no such thing as a NIMBY movement. And this word, you might hear it thrown around a lot, There's no such thing as a NIMBY movement. I mean, it'd be interesting if there was, but when someone doesn't agree with when someone doesn't agree with a YIMBY, with their destructive policies, they're instantly labeled this derogatory, like you're a NIMBY, you're like a subhuman. It's a very interesting phenomenon where it's like, it's like America, love it or leave it, right? You either agree with the YIMBYs or you get kicked out the door and labeled a NIMBY. There's no such thing as a NIMBY. It's not a political movement. There's no such thing. There is a YIMBY political movement that's very self-identified. There's no such thing as a NIMBY movement. So I just want to leave that with the listeners. Right. I think we should start something. It would be cool if we had something, but right now, I don't think we have a coalition movement.
Yeah. But we do have, groups like Tank, like Gay Shame, like Homes Not Jails. I don't know how active Homes Not Jails is locally, but certainly you do have Who Not Bombs. I know was making a list of buildings that were potentially more squattable in San Francisco, and they do this for other cities as well. That list, it gets harder and harder to add buildings to that list, as many empty buildings as we have, just because of all of the landlord tech surveillance companies that are proliferating. But that said, the list exists. And thank you again for giving people, a little bit more information to arm themselves with as we continue to try to push back against landlords.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. And I just want to plug Tenants Together. They're another one that's helped me on occasion. There's a few of them out there. It'd be cool to get like a list going where all these different resources are together for the next.
Yeah, no, totally. I'll put some links to these organizations as well.
That would be
in the show notes.
That would be great.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
All right. Many thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening to the show, and especially thank you to everyone who is contributing over at patreon.com/Sad Francisco. You're making it possible for Sad Francisco to exist. And if you're not already a member, think about joining. Again, it's patreon.com/Sad Francisco.